Uh, I'm Charles Douglas Lummis, sometimes known as Doug Lummis. I've been living in Okinawa since the year 2000. So I'd like to talk about what the movement in Okinawa is thinking and doing right now. And 2 years ago, December 24th, the Okinawan newspapers, of which there are two, had as headline news that the government had announced that in the event of what they call a Taiwan incident happens, that is to say, a war between China and Taiwan, Okinawa would become a war zone. And from the following January last year, two new slogans appeared in the Okinawan vocabulary of anti-war. One is "No More Battle of Okinawa." In Japanese, "No More Okinawa-sen." And the other is "Steishi," that is to say, throw away pawn, or sacrificial pawn. That's the expression in the English. In Japanese, "Steishi," because they're thinking not of a chessboard, but of a go board. That is a player in the game that you allow to be killed to save the others. No More Okinawa-sen sounds very strange. If you know your history, you know that any war between the U.S. and China that involves Okinawa is not going to be very much like the Battle of Okinawa. China has no reason and no plans, as far as anybody knows, to land troops on Okinawa beaches and fight their way across the Okinawan islands and take the territory for their own. Nobody's talking about that. China is interested in restoring, as they believe it, Taiwan to as a prefecture or whatever of China. And the involvement of Okinawa is that if they try to do that, if they use military force in an attempt to retrieve Taiwan, the U.S. and Japan will attack them from Okinawa. And given the logic of war, if missiles fly from Okinawa Islands, either the main island or the smaller island, either attacking China's mainland or ships at sea, China will sort of automatically send missiles back to the places where missiles came from, which means landing on the Okinawan outer islands or Okinawa main island, or that's if they are very accurate, they will land in the U.S. bases. But if they are not accurate, which they are usually not, they will land on Okinawa people's houses and schools, and maybe my house, which is in the middle of Naha. And lots of Okinawans will be killed in this, even though Okinawans have no part of this war. They're not participants in it. They don't benefit from one side or the other winning, or they're not harmed by one side losing. It's got nothing to do with them. and Okinawans have never been asked, consulted in any way about whether it's a good idea to get into a war between Japan on the U.S. on one side and China on the other. So it's a very absurd situation. And it also brings up in the Okinawan political memory, the memory of the Battle of Okinawa. In the case of the Battle of Okinawa, most Okinawans believe that Japan planned, arranged the situation so that the principal battle land war, the last war of World War II, would not come to Yamato Japan. That is to say, the Japan north of Okinawa, but would be confined to basically the colony of Okinawa. And the people suffering from it would be the Okinawan people that the Japanese, Yamato Japanese, consider a lower order of people and have discriminated against for years and years and years. So no more Okinawa-sen, no more Battle of Okinawa means that the people here see an analogy between the way they were treated by Japan in World War II and the way they're being treated by Japan now. As repeated over and over and over, more than 70% of all the U.S. bases in Japanese territory are in Okinawa. And what's that about? The military people say, oh, it's because it's close to someplace in China. But nobody believes that here. It's because the Japanese people on the mainland don't like to have those bases near their homes, but they would like to have them somewhere nearby. And so it's okay to have U.S. bases in their country so long as they're not quite in their country. They're in this place called Okinawa, which is sort of like Japan and sort of not. And that all the troubles that you get when there are U.S. bases nearby will be 70% of them will be in this area of Okinawa, which is not 70% of Japanese territory, but less than 1%. So the accidents of aircraft, things falling from aircraft, hit and run incidents by drunken GIs and pollution and the humiliation of having foreign bases in your land without your permission, all of that, most of that is concentrated in Okinawa. That has been a theme in the movement for years now, what they call structural discrimination. It's not the individual discrimination of American GIs person by person. Some of them are probably imagine that they're not discriminating, but the structure of humiliation, it's also structural humiliation. It's concentrated on Okinawa. But in this last year, it's come to be realized that this has another aspect, and that is if a war happens, since 70% of the U.S. bases are in Okinawa, then 70% of the war damage, maybe even more, will be in Okinawa. It seems that the Japanese government, by announcing, they have announced that Okinawa will be a war zone. They have not announced that any other prefecture in Japan will be a war zone, to my knowledge. They seem to believe that they can have a war with China, of all things, and that the damage, the hurt, the killing, the bloody mess that it will be entirely, or at least mostly, confined to Okinawa. So they're saying, again, we're being treated as the sacrificial pawns. The big war is going to come here. Maybe a few things will happen in what they call mainland Japan, but most of it, they hope, will happen in Okinawa. Now, I think they're dreaming. I think if this war actually begins, if I were a Chinese military officer in charge of sending off missiles to the place where missiles are being sent to us, I would surely send a few to not only to Kadena, but to Yokota Kichi in Tokyo, Yokota Base in Tokyo, which is actually the headquarters of the U.S. military in this area. I don't see why they would not do that. So I think it's a fool's strategy on the part of Tokyo. But from the standpoint of the Okinawans, it is the ultimate humiliation, the ultimate insult that they're not only being structurally subjected to the nuisance of bases, but in the case of war, they are supposed to be the ones primarily doing the dying. They have struggled and struggled and struggled for 70 years to get rid of these bases and have failed to do that. But it is a terrible, bitter irony that Okinawa, after all these struggles to keep war away from their very, very peaceful culture, that because of this absurd war situation, that they should be the ones to do the dying. It seems that America is hoping that the Japanese self-defense forces will do the main work, and they're building one after another missile sites, that is, new bases or sites on the outer islands of Okinawa. And on those islands, one after another, the Japanese self-defense forces are building facilities to fire missiles at China. And yeah, they are hoping, America is hoping that to use the Japanese self-defense forces as a sacrificial pawn. And Japan generally is hoping to use Okinawa as a sacrificial pawn. It's a sort of a double strategy.